What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right.
Oh,
Awesome.
cool.
Awesome. Well, welcome to today's call. I am super excited to be hosting this one alongside. We have this is going to be a special Global Connect call. And Harvey, do we have, is Ken on the line? I don't see Ken. Oh, there he is. There he is.
Ken is here. Yep.
I do see Ken. And is Brian here?
I can't see Brian yet.
Okay. Maybe you can shoot him a message here if he's not here yet. Ken Holmes, obviously coming from the sandy, soft beaches of Hawaii, living it right, doing it right. Love it, man. And so we are recording already. So this call, let me preface this a little bit. And
Can I just say something real quick? I mean, you didn't even bring me up, so I don't know
Steve,
what the deal is with that.
I knew you were here.
Who are you again?
Oh, Steve Cook. You guys might have heard of him. Steve, I'm just going to blame my surgery yesterday and the medications I'm on that. So I have an excuse in this one.
Well, I hope it went well.
It did. So let me I'm actually super excited for this call because, I think this topic has one of the most important and widespread effects on your investing success and how you're going to do as an investor. And that is how you do due diligence, right? This is like super scary for people. This is also one of the people's most often asked questions, I think, especially if you're a new investor, sometimes even an experienced investor. Like, this is the part of the deal that if you mess up, it could hurt you. Right. And there are a couple of treacherous areas of investing, but the due diligence, I believe, is one of the most important, especially one of the earliest, most important stages you can do. And so what we decided to do was grab some of our most experienced, successful investors within Lifeonaire and get them together and talk about the differences of how they do. All right, I'm going to stumble over this all day, guys. How they do due diligence. And how they approach and think about due diligence. What are the steps? What are the mindsets? What's the perspective? What kinds of things are they looking at? What are some of the gotchas that they want that they take a close look at, and how they handle the process. And so we have Steve Cook, as you guys know, the founder of Lifeonaire. Steve, Steve, I know these numbers are outdated, but gosh, you had done what, like 104 deals your first 2 years in the business. Is that correct?
105. But
okay.
Close enough.
And I don't even know what that number is now. I don't even know if you know what that number is now. It's a lot. It's a lot. We have Ken Holmes. Ken you've done and seen it all. Ken, you've done everything from new construction to flipping to storage. You have amassed. You've been pretty much in real estate your entire professional career, as I understand it, for the most part.
Just say it. I'm old.
I was saying it nicely, man. So Ken is brilliant with numbers, and he's a guy who's great at investing and due diligence as well. And is Brian, are you on the line yet, man? If Brian, so the other guy here, and I'll text him as well to see if he can get in while we're talking here. Is Brian Meidam. Brian Meidam, a super successful investor as well. Very, very bright. He used to be on Wall Street. And so, he knows how to look at numbers, right? And so, you understand his mindset. And so we have a diverse array of incredibly experienced guys spanning, if I had to guess, we're looking at probably 75, 80 plus maybe years of investing combined between all of them. And so there's a lot of deals, a lot of numbers, a lot of volume, a lot of experience.
You just made me feel old when you said that.
We got some good guys for you guys here today on this call is what I'll leave it at. And so I was thinking that we kind of start this panel kind of as a, like, let's define what due diligence is. First off, and let's start to kind of underline the importance of that. Steve, do you want to start that conversation off?
Sure. Well, anyway, just jumping in here right away, due diligence, I feel, is one of the most important parts of the deal. It's the most important part of the business. If you're not doing your due diligence, you're going to get yourself into trouble. I find that many people, especially newer investors, they actually trust other people with their due diligence. And I just caution you against that, because the other person who you're trusting to your due diligence, whether it's your real estate agent or a wholesaler or somebody else, they have a different motive than you do. Their deal is to get to get you to buy a property so that they can get paid. And they'll tell you all different kinds of things, but you have to confirm, you have to verify. You need to just do all of your own due diligence. I used to tell people, it's your money. You're the one doing the investing. You can't even trust your own mother when it comes to due diligence. And I can give a real story about that. When my mother was my real estate agent and I was too lazy to look into something one time, I asked her, and she gave me numbers and told me it was good. And I went ahead and I bought it, and I got burned. But my mother just didn't have the same experience that I had. Fortunately, I don't think I lost money on the deal. But I will also just throw out there that, my approach, as far as this call is concerned, and it's very interesting because with new things going on, and I'll just touch upon that real quickly, but I have historically have been a transactional real estate investor. I'm almost always buy and sell. And so whether it's wholesaling, whether it's rehabbing, whether it is new construction, I have a rehab that we are settling on closing today. I have a new construction that I'm closing on tomorrow morning that, for sale. But with all of that in mind, my expertise is not so much in the buy and hold, and particularly the commercial realm. And it's a pretty interesting thing right now, because my 16-year-old son is actually pursuing that kind of stuff. And I'm sort of coming alongside of him and learning with him. I know enough to be dangerous, and so I could teach him the basics. But as he is delving in, we're looking much harder. While he was in school yesterday, he submitted another letter of intent on a mobile home park. And so he's texting me from school, just asking me some things. And, hey, can I use your LLC? And I'm like, go ahead, just, put my company name on there. But real quick, I subscribe to the good enough mentality. I'm not a guy who pulls out a spreadsheet. I don't pull out my calculator. I don't sit there and calculate everything down to the penny. When I get involved in a deal and I pull the trigger, the deal is good enough that all kinds of things could go wrong and I would still make money. And that's the way that I like to do deals. And just as an example, I literally just, I just said I don't do spreadsheets, but I had to do a spreadsheet to figure out the profit here that I'm splitting with a builder. And the house that we're selling tomorrow is selling at $594,900. And the real estate agent commissions are not factored into this yet, but I am all in at $343,997 on a house that's selling for $594,000. And so those numbers are good enough, and I'll keep on doing those.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. And so Ken, and Brian is joining us. He had the wrong link. He'll be here in a second. He said, Ken, talk to us about how you think of due diligence.
Yeah, sure. I was thinking the thrust of this call was to talk about due diligence as far as, we have the investor board, people are putting up money for other people's deals and all that kind of thing. And I love that. That was, in many ways, my idea for Lifeonaire to have that. And the reason I like it so much is that I like both sides of it. I like to be the one getting money from other people for my deals. And I like to be the one putting my money into other people's deals. I'm doing both of those right now at the same time. And I enjoy both sides of it equally. And it's not like one side is good and one side is not good, or somebody's taking advantage of somebody. It's a true win-win when done correctly. I'm sure today we're going to get into a lot of things on the call, specifics of due diligence on, certain kinds of deals and this, that, and the other. But one thing I want to say, when I'm putting my money out with someone else, if I was going to give some money to Steve Cook for a deal that he was doing. There's kind of categories of things, like there's types of deals that I've done before, and so I understand them. If it's a rehab deal, and I've done 400 rehab deals, I understand that deal, and with a little bit of data, often data that I can get myself, I can vet that deal, and so that has a certain safety level. There's other genres of business that I pretty much get, but I've not really done them, and so that might be a little harder for me to vet than the other ones, therefore a little more risky just because of my knowledge level. Nothing about the deal itself, but my knowledge level on how to vet it. And then there's another deal, let's say an Airbnb deal. I've never done an Airbnb deal. I know people who have, but I don't really know what those numbers are supposed to look like or anything. And so that's way more riskier for me, maybe not for someone else, but for me, just because of my knowledge level. And then, and I'm hoping we can use the term, the term investor is going to be on this call a lot. And that can either be the guy with the money or the guy doing the deal. So I think we should call the guy doing the deal the player, and the other people, the investors, to delineate between those two. But so, and again, there's different type of players. There's someone who's done that same deal 40 times in the past, somebody who's done a handful of them. And then there's somebody, and it's their first rodeo, and they may be well coached in a group and all that kind of thing. But I think one needs to factor those things in when we're deciding the risk level. And then who is this person that wants the money? Now, I know Steve Cook, and so there's a lot. If Steve actually wanted my money for a deal, knowing him, knowing how trustworthy he is, us having a long relationship is going to factor a lot into my overall due diligence on that. Whereas it could be somebody that I don't know, and maybe they're coached by somebody I don't really know. And so because of that, again, the risk level is going up for me. It doesn't mean anything about that person. It's more about me. I don't know them. I don't know their coach. And so that's going to change my risk level, because really, to sum it up, due diligence is about risk. It's about risk. Somebody's going to put up some money on the deal. There's risk involved in that deal. And in due diligence, we're trying to mitigate that risk by looking at all the things that could go wrong up front. And we're trying to mitigate that risk by examining the people that we're dealing with and their skill level, who they're coached by, how well you know them, and stuff like that. But really, it's all about risk.
Gotcha, man. So that, I love that. Two quick things. One, hey, Matt, your phone keeps going. I keep muting you and it keeps unmuting you. I'm going to have to bounce you from the line because it sounds like you're sawing something in the background. So try to keep that muted. And Brian is also here with us. You're there, man?
You're muted, Brian.
I got to talk louder then, right?
Yeah.
What's up, man?
Technology,
Yeah. Come to me, Brian, for pointers on technology. I'll say.
Well, Ken, you got this fancy background, and I've just got this boring office with a, with a panel box and over my shoulder.
We picked the wrong person to ask for this call. I'm telling you that right now. Hey, we're just introducing the concept of due diligence, Brian. Like, what are your overall thoughts when you hear due diligence? What are some of the things you think about, and just give an overview of your perspective of its importance?
Yeah, my initial thought is most people don't do it. I think a lot of people get bedazzled by the potential of the returns and forget about how to price risk and how to mitigate risk. And it's really hard to mitigate risk when you don't understand what they are. And it's also hard to price what your return should be for that risk if you don't understand what it is. So, I mean, there are times where I'll take a flyer on something when I'm still going to do due diligence on it because I don't like losing money, and I don't think most people do. But there are times, basically, like on hard money loans, I will look at it where if I'm not comfortable owning the asset, I don't want to do the deal. And I think a lot of people, and I've fallen into this trap as well, where I'll do the math and calculate, okay, on a 6-month loan, I'm going to get, $6,000 in points, another $5,000 in interest. I'm going to make $11,000. And if I didn't do this deal, my money's just going to be sitting in the bank account, and I'm losing 9% after inflation on that. So I think you still have to ignore the returns that are available and still look at the asset and the person behind the asset. And I want to lend to people where if the wheels fall off, they're going to sell, off the deal, they're going to sell their car and ride a bicycle to pay me back. So those are the people that I want to lend to. And if I don't get that feeling about them, I'm just not going to do the deal, regardless of the money potential that's there. And then there's times where I've done deals where I've trusted a friend of mine who's a lot smarter than me that has done the due diligence and like really deep dived into it, and where they've pulled, and this was this was not a real estate type of a deal. This was more of a speculative business. And they did the homework to make sure, okay, does everything this person says they own or that this business owns, do they really own it? So they went and pulled all the real estate deeds to make sure that, title was proper, did all the research on LinkedIn to see if everything matched up there. Obviously people can lie on LinkedIn, but showing all their business affiliations, their past history. And there's a lot of work to do there. But I think the reality is most people don't do as good a job at due diligence as they should. And that can lead to real problems. The first loan I ever did went bad. And I learned some things by doing that. And the reality is if you're in the lending business, eventually something's going to go bad. And you think you've priced for risk, mitigated all your risk. I had someone file bankruptcy on me, not once, but 3 times. And finally, the judge labeled them as a serial filer and said, you can't file bankruptcy anymore. But every time I would go to file the foreclosure, the day of the foreclosure, and to do that, I had to obviously do all the legal requirements and pay like $350 each time to report that in the legal newspaper for the notices, everything else. So it was very costly. The day before, they would file a bankruptcy. And then they wouldn't comply with the bankruptcy, would get kicked out of bankruptcy, and we'd do the same song and dance. And then it went into, I was getting payments from the bankruptcy trustee, like a measly, it was under $200 a month, and it went on forever. And it finally last month, or maybe the month before, we finally got paid off everything that was owed. But just the brain drain and the hassle of dealing with attorneys, it's super expensive. And usually attorneys don't have any incentive to speed anything up. So it can be a process when a mistake's made by you, or sometimes, crap just happens.
So in the case you mentioned, is that something you think that could have been prevented in hindsight? Did you see any signals that this person may have given you those difficulties?
Hindsight, if they would have filed bankruptcy before on someone else, the way the Wisconsin rules work, I don't know if it's federal or state, but from my understanding, they could not have filed on me. And I think my preference would be to just lend to an entity instead of the individual, because they also made claims in court that they were living in the property and they weren't. Even though it was an investment loan purely for investment purposes, they weren't allowed to live in the property under the terms and conditions of the loan. In court, they said they did. So then the judge is like, well, now the rules change from investment property to owner occupied. And I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin area, Milwaukee County. And the judges are very liberal. I guess I'll leave it at
that. Pro tenant, perhaps.
Yes, perhaps.
Okay. So one other thing here that I think it's important to distinguish between is like you have due diligence from you're the investor, your boots on the ground, you're the person who's procuring the deal, you're analyzing the deal, and then you have due diligence from the side if you're either a financial partner or an investor. Why don't we talk about first? And I'd love let's have a discussion here rather than just like me asking you guys questions, because I'm going to run out of questions. But like I'd like to start maybe with you, Steve. Like you're an investor. You see a potential deal. What are some of the actual steps? Let's talk about like tangible steps that you do if you're vetting a deal to decide whether this makes sense financially and whether you want to pursue it.
Well, the bottom line is for me, Brian had touched upon it, and I have really moved more and more in this direction. The longer I invest, the quality of the asset is my number one concern. And there was a day that I would buy anything if the price was right, and so valuation, the price of the property is a very important factor as well. And so that both of them are extremely important. Price will take care of a whole lot of things. I'm famous for, talking to my students when they sit there and they tell me, oh, I'm not going to make an offer on it. It just doesn't fit my criteria. And then I asked them, I say, so if you could get it for $1, would you buy it? And they say, well, of course, if I could buy it for $1, I'd buy it. And I say, well, then you got to get your criteria straightened out, because price is your actual criteria. It's not, all the other things that you were using to sort of eliminate that deal. But, I'm at a point today where the quality of the asset is what's of highest importance to me. I don't like dealing with lower quality real estate anymore. I prefer to deal with higher end stuff. It's just at the point that I am in my life. Yet if I'm working with a new person who is just getting started out, sometimes there's lower hanging fruit in neighborhoods that I don't want to buy in today. And I would recommend that they go there. Now, having said that, I'm also going to caution them even more that you need to buy for less than I would. When I'm dealing with high-end, good real estate, I don't have to be as careful with my spreads. I still like to have a large spread, but, good real estate is very forgiving in the sense that if you paid a little bit too much, it's good real estate. There's somebody out there who will want to buy it. If you're dealing with lower end real estate and you pay too much, you're stuck, and it gets really hard. And that's when you see people getting all kinds of creative, everything from, this house that they plan on flipping, they might even consider selling it with owner financing or rent to own. And that was not their original strategy. They may end up having to keep it as a rental just to get by, because they're into it for too much and they're not able to sell it. So, I'm definitely jumping right into where is it located? What's the quality of the asset? And then secondarily, it's, what can I purchase it for? And, I still want to be in, the maximum that I want to be into anything is going to be 70%. I've done 70% of the after repair value, or 70% of the after build, or, whatever that might be. And I know that for people who are just getting started out, or people who are not doing that, sometimes they think, that's just an awesome thing if you could buy for 70%. But when I say, I want to be in at 70, the reality of the situation is most of the time I'm into it for a lot less than that. I don't want that. That's not my preference. That's not what I'm shooting for. That's not my target. I try to get in for considerably less than 70. And on a really good piece of property, I'd consider, paying 70 or even maybe 72, 73 today for something that's really good. But apart from that, I like to be in 50 to 60% of what the LTV or ARV is. And I know, again, for those who struggle with finding something at 70, they think I'm crazy. But when you've been doing this long enough, it happens all the time. So with that in mind, I encourage people to be firm with your numbers and to be patient if you can. Some people can't be patient. They're the ones I say, hey, listen, let's get you started in the lower end neighborhoods. Let's go for the low hanging fruit. We've got to get you moving. We got to get some experience under your belt. We've got to get you into, actually doing transactions. I have the luxury today of waiting if I want to. I don't have to have a deal every month or every couple months or every quarter. I do things today because I want to do it. So but the reality of the situation is as hot as this market has been that we've been in, I've still been able to pick up those deep discount deals. And so finding good real estate with deep discounts is where I'm looking. And now if I'm going to invest with somebody else, which I do, right now I'm in partnerships with 2 people or 3. But when I'm putting up all of the money for the deals, which, and again, I'm in 2 partnerships right now where I'm the one putting up all of the money. The character of that borrower is really important to me. And like Ken said, somebody who's going to, sell their car and ride their bicycle if they had to. It's not that would be my expectation of them, but that's the kind of person who I want to work with. Throughout the years, through my coaching relationships, I have come across situations where a deal's not working out and the person just throws their hands up and leaves my student hanging. And that's just a head scratcher to me. I can't understand how somebody could do that. And yet those people are out there. And, that's why I think it's important to sort of get to know who you're working with, because at the end of the day, the person, and in many of these deals, especially some of the deals that we see going on in the Deal Makers Forum, when we see people raising a lot of money and syndications happening, in those cases, I think the most important part of the deal is the person running the deal. That goes to number 1 on my list, if that's the kind of deal that I'm participating in. And then the quality of the asset and then the pricing is the least, important to me when I'm doing that. But I think that the person who is behind the deal is by far the most important part of the deal when we're looking at some of those. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And I want to just rewind I want to unpack that a little bit. You mentioned a couple of times having a quality asset, a good property. What are some of the criteria you use to determine that and measure that?
So, today, again, historically, I'm a single family home investor. And so whether it's rehabs or new construction, I'm building and buying in the upper end zip codes. I don't like to go down to, here's probably the best way to put it. Take whatever your median price point is, and I'm above it. I tend not to go below it. And so for the area, I like to go with the higher end homes. And I do that for a couple of reasons. Number 1, I feel like they're safer investments. But number 2, the spreads are bigger. Same amount of work on a $500,000 house as you do to a $200,000 house, but you make considerably more just because of the size of the numbers and dealing with a $500,000 home. But I also feel that the $500,000 home, when you're dealing with a median price point that's $400,000, the $500,000 home is a safer investment than the $200,000 house. The $200,000 house is $200,000 because nobody wants it, and the $500,000 home is where people want to be. And so, many people would argue otherwise. And I'll just say that when I first got started in the business, when I was broke, I was looking at $25,000 homes, and I was looking in $50,000 neighborhoods. And in my mind, that was less risky because the number was smaller. It took a while for me to recognize that number is smaller because nobody wants that piece of crap. And it was actually more risky than the other side.
What Steve's really telling you is he has become a snobby investor. That's
what I'm hearing.
I have. I'll own it. I'll own that.
Well, okay, so that's valuable. And are there any particular characteristics, or do you simply look at the median home price, or are you also looking at, are there other characteristics that are underlying that value? Like, is it because it's in a good school zone, for instance, or are there anything else, or are you pretty much focused on median home price?
Well, that's basically my number 1 criteria right now is the buying in the areas that have the best school districts.
Okay.
And people want to live there. And, as we're entering into, potentially an uncertain market, people still always want to get their kids into the best school districts. And those areas tend to do well. Even when markets might correct, there's people still moving into those areas just to get their kids there. And so, I'll just share just one last thing, and just to put some things into perspective, we've all seen a softening in the market as of late. There's no question about it. And there's been a shift. It doesn't mean that the market's bad. I think the market is still good, but there has definitely been a shift. Along with that, we have a lot going on right now. We have 5, 6. I have total of 7 going right now. 5 houses under construction, but of those 7, 2 of them settle between today and tomorrow. But we've got 5 new constructions. And I decided with the softening in the market that I might want to try and pre-sell some of the homes, which I typically don't do, but I just wanted to, if there were any buyers out there, I wanted to grab them. I mean, one of them, word of mouth, we sold. We're setting a new high on the stuff that we're doing at 649.9. I just signed another contract this morning at 750 for one of the homes that we're building. And so that was on the market, I think it's 3 or 4 days. And we had 2 interested parties and we got a cash offer for 750 today. So I have the pressure on now to finish these houses in the next 60 and 90 days. But, we'll get that done.
Gotcha.
But having said that, it's also rated one of the top school districts.
Got it. Okay. Ken, how about you, man?
Well, I don't even remember what the original question was now.
Your favorite color and
He's old.
That's right.
That's what happens when you get old.
So we're talking about some of the things you look for in due diligence. If you're the investor, your boots on the ground, like what are some of the first things you're looking at? Some of the maybe numbers you're running or characteristics of the property, or like what are some of the tangible things you do?
Okay, so I'm going to agree with Meidam in that the numbers are secondary to me being comfortable with the deal. And so if I'm dealing with somebody and they want me to put up all the money, or sometimes I've lent money to somebody who's already got 50 grand in the deal.
Well, hold on, Ken. Let me interrupt you. I want to know specifically about when you yourself are the boots on the ground finding the deal, not when you're lending. Yeah, we're gonna cover that separately.
Well, I want to try to be in a position to where I would lend money to that deal. I always put the investor's hat on. I want my investors to make a double-digit rate of return, and I want us to be in a position that if things went bad, we're liquid all the way through. If we buy cheap enough that at any point, if we need to quit, we can sell and get their money back. I don't ever want anyone to lose any money on a deal with me. If people have been on my real estate calls, if you'll take care of your investors as if they were your mother-in-law and they would have to move in with you if you lost any money of theirs, then and you keep doing that, you can get all the money you want. It's ridiculous the amount of money that I can get and other people can get. But I've really, really tried hard to take care of my investors. Some people say I give away too much, but I value the investors more than I value the profit on a single deal. The investors are more important than a single deal. If I allow them to make good money and I take good care of them and I keep them safe and I do whatever I got to do to fix something when it goes wrong, then I have the ability to go out and make, $1 million offers and not know who's going to put up the money, but yet know that I'm going to get the money. And that is way more valuable to me than the profit on any particular deal. So I want to be in a position where we're liquid all the way through. Right now I'm doing storage deals. And if I pay the deal we just sold, I paid $1.2 million for that deal. And I felt like that was a really good price. It was a little off market. And I felt like if we needed to, we could turn around and sell that deal for 1.25, 1.3 tomorrow. So we're liquid on day one. And as I put money into it, I'm raising the value of it. And so we're liquid all the way through. Now we have a 2 or 3 year plan that we're eventually going to sell it. And we did. But at any point, if something had gone sideways, I felt like we were liquid. I felt like there was no way I was going to lose any of those people's money. Again, because that's the most important thing to me, having access to those funds. I can send out an email and raise $1 million. That is the most important thing to me. And so I watch over my people very, very hard, and I make whatever I make after I take care of them. And that's just the way I look at it. I'm going to make sure they make a double-digit rate of return. I'm going to make sure they're safe. I run my old spreadsheet and everything, and then I go, okay, here's how much I think Ken's going to make. Am I willing to do the work for that amount of money? Yes or no? And if I'm not, then I don't want to do it, because I'm not going to put them at risk. Because again, that relationship, those relationships are the most important thing to me. I'm going on, more than a decade of not borrowing any money from banks. And yet I'm doing more and more business at higher and higher price points and can continue to be able to do it. And that's because of that relationship of trust that I've built with people where they think I'm safe. And that was my whole goal all the way through. So again, I want to be liquid. I want to be in a position that if we had to sell it tomorrow for whatever reason, they're getting all their money back. Maybe we're not going to make what we hope to make, but every one of them is getting all their money back.
Yeah.
I want that. That's, ever how it depends on what kind of deal you get, but ever how that has to happen, that's what I want.
Got it. Brian, did you hear the question? Like, how do you, when you see if you got a deal that you're looking at and thinking of doing, what are the criteria you use?
Yeah. So let's just slice it up a little bit. I do retail deals as well as kind of like investor grade stuff. So for this example, let's just look at investor grade stuff because that may apply to more people on the call with newer as well as experienced people.
What's the difference between the two? How are you defining those?
He's putting that Wall Street jargon out on us.
I know, man. Like, let's dumb it down. Yeah.
All right. So the retail deals would be ones where it's I'm selling to an end user that's going to live in the property, and they're generally higher priced inventory, nicer condition, nicer neighborhood. And then the wholesale deal is, more of an investor grade rent, higher quantity of rentals in the neighborhood. More landlords are buying there, et cetera. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So on the latter and the wholesale type property, I look at how many cash sales are in the area. And I'm going to look at, and you can do that getting access to MLS. I'm going to look at days on market for sales, retail sales, as well as kind of the investor grade stuff. So when you pull those comps, if you look at the retails, you can kind of tell retail sales, one, by pricing and condition, but two, by the terms of the financing. So if there's a loan on there, it's typically retail. If it's cash, it's typically investor. So I want to pay attention to days on market. And then I want to also look at the size of the project. How quickly can I get in and out? The quicker I can get in and out, the least amount of risk I'm taking, right? So if I can go in there and have a trash out crew in there the day after closing, having a cleaning company in there the day after that, and then get pictures and have that thing listed, I could be in and out of that deal in 10 days with a cash buyer. Titles, all they have to do is update title. It's real easy. If the house is just completely nasty where you've got to do work to it and there's no other option, now my days on market have increased, my risk has increased. I'm also looking at floor plans. I think as the market softens, they pay more attention to that. Investors pay more attention to that, as well as the scope of work. They want good floor plans with lighter scopes of work, so they can mitigate risk on their end. So if you're uncomfortable with that, one easy thing to do is to use an option on that property and tie it up that way, where you're not actually closing on it yourself with your own funds, but you're using an option. An option on real estate works the same as an option on a stock, where you have the right but not the obligation to purchase that. The key in that is just being super upfront and honest with that seller and just saying, hey, I may or may not be able to help you. Because with an option, you don't have an obligation to buy it. So the last thing you want to do is come across to them like you're going to be buying it and then not performing on it, because then you wreck your reputation as well as you make all other investors look as bad as you just did. So in that situation, you just want to be like, hey, I may or may not be able to help you. I don't know. I know your back's up against the wall. Let me see if I can use my network of buyers. I'm going to need access to the property, et cetera, et cetera. And then you get a set time frame to try and get that property sold. And then you exercise your option to purchase, and then you resell it. So that's a way to really take pretty much no risk besides that option premium in your time, and get a deal done in this type of environment. So I would say I don't use that strategy very often. Where in instances I do, it's kind of in areas where I typically don't buy rougher areas that I really don't even want to go into, and I'll do most of it over the phone. So I don't know, did that help at all?
Yeah. So so Jamie's asking in the chat, what are the steps of due diligence? I want to put the right habits in place when purchasing an investment, either a flip or a hold. And so let's talk like really, you guys all answered this question, but like, let's talk really, and I'm guessing there may be some differences here in the order of the steps you guys do, but I'm also guessing there's probably a significant amount of overlap in how you guys will vet a deal. And so I'm guessing for most people, it's going to start by, well, actually, let me ask, are you guys, what are the first steps? Like, you have a deal come across your plate, whether it's the MLS, you have a referral. Is the first thing you guys are doing, are you looking at comps? Like, what are you looking at? What's the very first couple things you guys do?
I want to look at the property. The first thing I want is the address. Okay. I'm going to go on Street View. I'm going to go on Google Maps. I'm going to go on Google Earth or whatever. And I'm just going to eyeball it because my gut feel right then and there sometimes will stop all due diligence, and I don't have to waste my time on anything else. If I don't like the street, don't like the area, don't like the way the property looks for whatever reason, I don't care about any of those numbers. My gut says this is bad. So I'm always going to start with actually looking at it myself, not somebody else's photos, but getting on Google Maps and just looking at it. Then I'm going to get their photos and MLS listing or whatever. I want to get their comps, but I also want to check for other comps on my own to see if there's any that they were obviously a comp and they just left it out, didn't want me to see it. I would find that interesting if there was a comp 3 doors down that sold 2 months ago, low, and whoever's asking me for money did not let me know about that. I would find that interesting. I'm going to look at the scope of work. I'm hoping they have some kind of scope of work and budget. And part of what I'm going to look at on that is if it's 20, 25 grand in work, that's one thing. How wrong can you be? But if it's $100,000+ in work, you can be pretty doggone wrong. So I want to look at that. And then I want to, toward the end, I'm going to be saying, well, let's talk about paperwork. What kind of paperwork? How will we actually, if I did this, how would it actually transpire? And kind of get an idea of what they're thinking about how this deal would be structured. Doesn't mean I'm going to do it that way. But again, It tells me a lot about who I'm dealing with based on how they think it would be the best way to do the paperwork. So anyway, that's the order I go with.
So just, I want to hear from Steve and Brian, but before we do that, you mentioned like, if I don't like the street, if I don't like the house, like what are some of the things, like, how do you know, like, what are you looking for when you look at a street, when you look at a house, what are some of the criteria that you're using to gauge that? Like if there's railroad tracks or a graveyard, that kind of stuff. Oh, Ken.
Are you asking me?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what the deal is, but if I can see that the nature of the area changes very close by. We've all seen areas where a block over, 2 blocks over, you're going from 300,000 to 50,000 for some reason. If I see boarded up houses on my street, if I see for rent signs on my street, that's all pertinent information. If I look at the house and it looks, or whatever it is, but if it's a house and I'm looking at it and it appears that it's already been added onto a couple times and we're not dealing with just the original structure, I'm not saying I won't do that deal, but that's going to, I'm going to notice that. But mainly it's just the area. If it's in the middle of a good neighborhood, I'm interested. But if it's on the edge and looks like we're headed toward the bad side, then the comps may or may not be right if the comps are in the middle of the neighborhood. So mainly things like that. And just if you've been in the business for a while, you have a certain sense of things. Okay. And so I want to take advantage of my experience and just eyeball the thing.
So, and even if you haven't been in business for a while, like one thing to consider is that if, let's say the market drops 15% and you're in the middle of a neighborhood, and your house is probably going to drop around 15%. Well, if you're on a corner lot, a kitty corner from a laundromat or a bar or something else, you're going to drop more than 15%. So regardless of your experience level, just using, like, if you're sitting in the driveway, does it feel like you're in the middle of a neighborhood, or does it feel like you're in a commercial area? If you're in that commercial area, when the market drops, you're probably going to get hit harder.
Yeah.
If you're doing a residential property.
Right.
So Brian, yeah. So both of you guys kind of mentioned like comps, and this is a huge part of this whole piece. Like, what are you guys considering a comp? You know, like if a property, and I guess some of the larger level stuff is like, hey, it's a comparable size house, ideally same style. You got a similar lot, maybe built in the same period of time. Like, what are some of the other criteria that you guys use?
Definitely going to be location, proximity. Is, you know, when you can pull your comps directly from the same neighborhood that you're working in, that's obviously going to be the best thing that you can have. But if I can, I just want to touch upon and just say, you know, I think that it's almost a tough question for Ken, myself, and Brian to answer, because so much of it is instinctively for us today, because we've been doing it for so long. But I'm literally just trying to get back to my beginning and my roots, and to, you know, explain to people how I've gotten to where I am. And, you know, the reality of the situation is doing comps and due diligence today is a whole lot easier than it was when we first got started in the business. I mean, we didn't have the information available to us that we do today, that within moments, I mean, you can know whether or not you should pursue something. But when, just to put things into perspective, you know, I start with the numbers. The first thing I want to do is know the numbers and know whether or not it's even worth me pursuing it further. Do I need to go out and look at the house? And, you know, today we can find pictures online and things like that. But I used to have to get in my car to go look at a house and to know what was there. And, you know, but I'll just put it to you this way. And this was one thing that was really frustrating. And this was a difference. I mean, I think that Ken and Brian will both attest to this. This was one of the things that made a difference when I got started in the business. When a real estate agent would give me prospective properties to look at, because that was the only way I could get lists at that time. I had to go directly to an agent. I couldn't pull up a realtor.com or a Zillow or anything like that. And so they would literally print out listings for me. And when the agents would ask me, you know, what I wanted or what my criteria was, I just told them, give me the whole zip code. Give me everything in the zip code, and then give me everything in that zip code and everything in that zip code. And I wanted to research every single property that was available at the time. I wanted to know about the retail properties. I wanted to know about the vacant properties that were, you know, potential, you know, properties that I could pick up. But I studied every one of those, and I would go on out then. And when I would try to determine what my comps were potentially going to be, you know, for a prospective property that I could buy. And I would go out and I would drive by and I would look at those comps as well. And, you know, today we can shortcut a whole lot of that today, but I just want people to start thinking about, I can do that today in a few minutes from home. I can also pull up all the comps. I can look at pictures of the comps. I can, you know, get potentially even a description online of what was done to the comps, whether it was fully renovated, or I can also see what the investor who may have renovated the house and flipped it, what they bought it for, what they sold it for. There's a lot of information that's available to us today. And so, you know, if I see that an investor is buying houses in a particular neighborhood and they're paying, you know, $80,000 for their homes that they're fixing up, and they're selling them for $220 when they're finished, you know, when that prospective deal is sitting in front of me and it's at 125, I feel like I'm paying too much because the other guys are getting them for 80. And so I look at the investor comps, I look at the retail comps. I want to know all of that. And, you know, the number one thing for me is the numbers. And if the numbers look good, then I'll spend the time to actually go on out and look at the property. If you know, if the other investors are buying for 80 and there's one that's sitting in front of me and it's 150 or 160, still below market, I'm not even going to waste my time going out to look at that house. until I know I can get it closer to 80. And I just don't spend another minute doing it. So with that in mind, numbers are important. And then there is that gut feel that, I think that maybe the thing that Ken was trying to explain, I just get a good gut feel. I mean, there are some properties that the moment you pull up to them, it's a home run. And, and I get very aggressive with those. If I have any sense of, people wouldn't want to buy it because of this, or people wouldn't want to buy it because of that. If I'm looking to do a rehab, I'll probably want to pass on that. But if I'm already out there, I still want to buy it if I can get it for the right price. So I'm going to just come on in with a low ball number. And if I can get it at my low number, then I'll wholesale it to somebody else who's interested in doing it. But, I don't like to go look at a property and not make an offer. So, I'll pursue everything, but I'll come in really strong if it's something that I feel good about and I want to do the flip with myself.
Got it.
What I think can be challenging in this market is like the private equity firms, the hedge funds and the REITs, like they're paying a lot for inventory right now. And I've been selling to them, and I got a call from a competitor. He found out I was a buyer on one that I was paying 62 for, and paying 62. Like, he's like, man, what in the world are you doing? He's like places are wreck. Like, you're like, how can you pay that much? And then he started making me feel nervous, right? But I knew I had this private equity firm that was going to pay me more because they're like drunk on Kool-Aid, and they've been drunk on Kool-Aid for a while. Because not that long ago, I would have been paying 35 to 40 for the same house. And I just put under contract for 62, and my buddy's calling me. He's a competitor. He's like, you're freaking crazy. Well, we just closed 2 days ago at 92.5 to this private equity firm. So the hard part is, in my mind, is like when the music stops, I can't be too aggressive where if they bail out of the market, because one of the private equity firms, they bailed out. So there's one left. Supposedly there's one more coming in. But you can't build your business on the greater fool theory, finding someone to pay, that's dumber than you, that's willing to pay more. Because eventually you're going to be wrong and stub your toe, and then you're going to be out of business if you can't sustain the loss. So you still have to be smart about it. But it can be challenging at times where you're like, what is the real comp? Like, what is this thing worth? And it is challenging. So I don't know, I would just be careful to, when you're looking at comps, especially as the market's softening, and then when the market's on fire, you can use those high comps for your after repaired value. But as the market's softening, like, you don't want to be using the high comps. You want to be using the comps that are a bit more tamed down.
Well, man, and I'm glad you brought that up, because somebody actually mentioned in the chat as well. They said, be careful if you have really recent, we're doing this call right now in August, and they said anything in May or earlier where the market was really hot. If you use those comps, you may get stung because the market was in a different place than it is now. And so this is something like when I was doing deals, because when I was flipping, I was like, hey, I want to sell this thing in like, a week or 2 weeks. And so I'm not going to look at a property that took 90, 120 days to sell. Like, I want to look at comps that had a recent and a low days on market that match that. And so I think, to your point, Brian, I think as the market changes, you got to be even more diligent in looking at really carefully, like, what, and not only alternative exits, like if you're going to have, whether you're going to sell it to somebody else or do something with it, but also being really diligent on like how old and how fresh is this pricing that I'm using to mark this deal. Because, and we've been talking comps here for people who don't know what that is. It's just comparable homes that you're using to get an estimate of what your property is going to be worth after it's fixed up. And so, anybody else, you guys want to have any other thoughts on that?
Well, as the market softens, most of us think comps in terms of comparable sales, something that's actually sold. Because you could have a house down the street and they're asking 200 and they ain't never going to get it. It's a 170 neighborhood. And so it doesn't really matter or whatever. And coming from an appraisal background, that's all we could ever use. Things that had actually closed and settled, and there's the price. But in a softening market, I think listings are very important. You could see 3 sales of houses all sold for 200 in the last 6 months. That makes you feel good. But then you go on the listings and you see one that was listed at 200 dropped to 190. You see a couple more for sale, days on market, instead of being, a week. Now they're at 20, 21 days. That's very pertinent information to have.
Yeah, that's a huge tip, man. That's great.
I think also as the market softens, the nicer your retail renovations have to be. Because when the market's super hot, people they want the house. They don't care if your bathroom is, has shag carpet in it, right? But they're getting pickier as they can get picky. As more inventory comes on, days on market are higher. So you've got to have a nicer house. And the easy way to do that is when you buy a place, you go on MLS, look at the active listings, because that's your current competition, what you're up against, and you want to be as good or better than them to have a good shot to hit your comp number.
Yeah, and I subscribe to that exact same mentality. One thing that I want to throw out there, and I think that this is really important, and I feel like a lot of people, especially newer investors, will ignore this. If it seems too good to be true, run. It's amazing to me at how often, people sit here and they see somebody who presents a deal that's got, a 24% return, or they're talking about, all the profit that this is going to have. And, sometimes, if it's a person of a good character, somebody who has a track record, it's one thing. When a newer person or somebody's presenting a deal to you for the first time, and it just has that, man, this is like the deal of the century. You're almost always, I have walked away from so many of those deals, and I have not been right every time. I mean, there's a couple times I'm like kicking myself, like, I should have gotten involved with that one. But I will tell you, I've also been right. And the times that I have been right, I am extremely grateful because I would have had to do a number of the ones that did work out just to make up what the losses would have been had I got involved. And so, I listen to people, I listen to people's presentations, and, I happen to be a person who pays really close attention to the little things that people say. I pay really close attention to, the numbers that they're throwing out, and perhaps I might hear inconsistencies with their numbers, or when somebody sits there and says, hey, I don't really know you guys, but, I can get the money for this deal, and I got friends who will back me, but I want to give you guys the opportunity. I mean, that immediately then it's like, you would not be calling me if your friends would back you, and or you wouldn't be trying to get me and all my friends to invest if you had all the money you needed sitting on the sidelines waiting for you, and you wouldn't give up so much to me. And not that long ago, I was presented with an opportunity of that nature, and it just did not feel right to me. And I decided not to participate in it. I let it be known that I thought the guys were not being upfront, and it turned out I was the one who was right. And in any case, I just encourage everyone, when you start to get that sense like this might be too good to be true, it's okay to walk away from them.
That's a great point, Steve. Also, I'd say we're kind of getting back to character a little bit here, which is what I think I heard all three of you guys mention as being a really large component to your involvement in any deal when somebody brings you a potential opportunity. And also, I want to say this, we have our deal makers forum for our titanium, or deal makers club for our titanium students. Just because a deal comes across there does not mean it's a good deal. Just because it's coming from someone in Lifeonaire does not mean it's a good deal. And so you still have to do your own due diligence. You guys have talked about the character component. Someone who's and actually this is funny. Like I remember at one of our Get a Life getaways, we gave our talk about, hey, being vulnerable, being authentic, and letting being truthful. And in that room, this guy said, "Hey, that sounds all great on the surface, but I do a lot of business with people in this room. And while I understand what you're telling me, like I have a real problem with that, because if they knew what was really going on in my life, they may not do business with me." And then someone else in that room stood up and they said, "Listen, you're wrong. You're the exact person I want to do business with, because I know you're going to tell me the truth and you're going to be honest with me. And when things are going wrong, or you're behind schedule or over budget, you're going to be truthful with me, and you're not going to lie to me." And so I think character is a huge part of this. And, someone who, so make sure. And I guess this can be a little bit hard to discern when you're new to an investment community. Do you guys have any, like, how do you grow to learn and satisfy that part of the equation for due diligence when now you're on you're the joint venture partner, you're the investor bringing the money? How do you start to get a gauge for that? That seems like a challenge.
I think you ask a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get involved with the first ones. You watch them and see how they play out. Let the people who already know, get involved. And then, for instance, I think Ken has shared some of his successes. Jeff Guo just shared one of his recent successes, and you got to watch that play out, and that, in my mind, just gives a whole lot more credibility to somebody. Now, you still have to do your due diligence the next time. If when Ken puts a deal out, or if Jeff Guo puts a deal out, I mean, you're probably 99% certain that you're going to do it, but you still have to go through the proper processes. You got to ask the questions. You need to do your due diligence, but that they have a track record. That they've got character, and you want to still vet it, make sure it's the kind of deal that you want to do. And if there's any red flags or anything that might come up, ask questions, find out, more about the deal. But I think that I would encourage people not to just jump in, be patient, sit back, watch a few of these deals play out before you start throwing money at them, and don't just, get in and see the first deal that comes by and start writing checks.
Yeah, it depends on what the deal is. I'm working in the storage arena a lot now, and there are investors that are putting up the 20% down, basically in second position behind $1 million, $1.5 million first mortgage. Now, on the face of that, that's really risky. But the people who are doing this understand storage enough to vet that deal without hardly any information from the guy who wants the money. They can vet that deal completely and totally on their own. And they can set up the paperwork in such a way that if the guy running the deal fails to perform for any reason, they get to take over, and they know they can take over that deal and make it work. It's a great deal. So while on the surface, 20% second mortgage behind an 80% first mortgage seems to be a horrible deal, it can be safe if the one putting up the money knows what they're doing, is willing to step in if things go sideways, and has the paperwork to step in if things go sideways. And of course, the deal is good enough that it can withstand all that. So there's so many things. It's hard to say, how exactly do we vet these deals? How do we vet risk? But, for me, I don't want to invest in anything I don't understand, period. It might be the best deal that ever came down the pipe, but if I don't understand it, it's no different than putting my money in the stock market and just hoping that it goes up. I'm not going to do it. I got to understand it. And if that means that my money's going to sit on the sidelines for a while, or at least I'm not losing it, and I when I say understand it, I want to understand it enough that if I had to, I could fly there or whatever, or find somebody to go fix that thing. There's been situations where somebody was rehabbing a house, and for whatever reason, they became unable to rehab that house. If you're in it good, you should be able to sell that to someone else, bring someone in, give them a taste, whatever you got to do to fix that. But you couldn't do that if you didn't understand how to rehab a house. You'd just be lost. So I basically I keep my money on the sidelines unless I understand it, as far as this kind of stuff goes.
I think on as far as duration of track record, like in the last 2 years, the reality is, if I bought a house and let's say I overpaid by 40 grand,
You make
by the time my rehab's done, what's happened?
you make 100 grand.
The market fixed it for
Right,
you.
the market fixed it. So whether I'm in residential flips, self-storage, apartment complexes, you name the asset class in the last 2 years, I could have been a complete and absolute moron, but my track record is still going to be unbelievable because the market has solved everyone's mistakes. Mm-hmm. So when the rubber hits the road is when things are going to get tough. So if you're looking at like some of these apartment syndicators and things like that, some of these guys have never been stress tested. And some people that are out there borrowing money that they're fairly new in the market haven't been stress tested either. And they may not know what they're doing, but the market has covered up all these mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Jamie has a question here. So is due diligence simply neighborhood, comps, numbers, deal, structure? And then aren't there title concerns or other things that are part of due diligence? What are those other things I need to check? And so, Jamie, what we're referring to right now is the due diligence as far as evaluating the risk and whether or not you're even going to move forward with the deal. The title stuff is all something that comes up. It's not something that you will personally do. And that's just going to get turned over to a title company. The title company is going to make sure the title is clear. You're not going to purchase a home that does not have a clear title, or if it ends up that the title wasn't clear, your title insurance that you paid for will take care of that. But that's really not something that you need to do. It is not uncommon, especially with the types of properties that we deal with, that the title company finds issues, but they work those issues out before we get to settlement. I mean, that's their job. And so we rarely, in all of my career, I think I've had one house, and I've bought and sold over 600 houses to date, but I think I've had one house that did not go to settlement because the title was not clear and they couldn't resolve the issue. And so those kinds of things will all work themselves out. We're really talking right now about the risk, the numbers. Is it the kind of deal that we want to get into? If you're dealing with stuff like land, or you're going to have to deal with environmental issues or stuff like that, that all sort of becomes part of your due diligence. But for instance, let's just say you're buying a gas station and you want to find out if there have been oil leaks or gas leaks or something. The first thing you're going to do is all the due diligence that we're talking about to know whether or not you want to move forward with it. And then when you enter into contract, then you're going to put in other things. You're going to have environmental surveys. You're going to have, discussions with the municipality about zoning. And that's a whole other gamut that goes beyond, we're talking the first level of due diligence at this point. And if that makes sense.
And that was my point about that. If I don't understand the deal, then I don't know what those due diligence items are. I've never bought a gas station. I have an idea, but that's about it. So I wouldn't invest with anyone buying a gas station because I don't know if all those things are getting handled or not, because I don't know what all of them are. So I'm just flat out not interested. I'm just not interested. Unless there's somebody else on the team putting up real money who has bought gas stations, and I trust that. If Brian Meidam was involved and he had bought 3 gas stations successfully in the past, and he said, yeah, this guy's got all the bases covered, then I would rely on my relationship with Brian. But without that, me not knowing, I'm not putting any money up. I don't even know what they're supposed to be checking.
Got it. And so speaking of knowing who else is involved in investment, which by the way, you always got to do your own due diligence. No one can ever do that for you. And so, for instance, if you heard that Steve was invested or somebody else, you don't take that as the golden stamp of approval, right? Like you're responsible for yourself. But with that being said, do you guys actually, let's say that you see you're familiar with the person, or you're not familiar with the person. Well, maybe they have a slight track record. They've done a couple deals. They put out a potential opportunity. They have some numbers there. Do you guys, how in depth are you going? Are you like going to their neighborhood and pulling comps to verify what they know what they're talking about? Or are you just taking their stuff at face value? Like, how do you make sure that you're getting the accurate assessment of what's going on? Or does it all come back to character and you just assume if they're, they have the character, then those are accurate?
I think that once you've established a relationship with people, I mean, there's many people who all I have to do is make a phone call to, and they would write a check, and they wouldn't even hesitate. They wouldn't even, ask me, hey, what's the draw schedule going to look like? I think that there is a trust that eventually gets built up that that's just the way it is. And I think that goes for any experienced investor. They have those people sort of in their back pocket where all you need to do is make a phone call and you give them just some basic details. And honestly, in those particular cases, it's almost, I think the person who is on the other end of the line, because of the track record that you have, is like, why are you telling me all this? Just how much you need?
Yeah.
And it eventually gets to that point. And so, trust and doing the right thing is just so important. And I remember, and I'll just share, I was only investing for about 3 or 4 years. And there was an attorney who was doing my settlements for me. He was also on a board of a bank and got me my first line of credit with a bank. And then he didn't want me borrowing from somebody else, and he wanted me to borrow from him. And so it just eventually got to the point where I would walk into his office. I would hand him a contract of a property I just put under contract. And he would say, where are you getting the money from? I would say, you. He'd say, how much you want? I would tell him. He would write that number in the top corner. He would put it down. And then he'd say, okay, what else? And that was it. It was done. I mean, everything I needed was already taken care of just from that conversation. I went so far as to ask him one time, I said, you do all these loans for me. I said, if I were to, I said, how much would you give me? How much would you lend me? And I was just asking out of curiosity one night. And he just said, secured or just with your signature? And I said, you mean you would do a signature loan for me? He said, yeah. And we're talking 20 years ago now. And I asked him, I said, well, how much, would you do? He said, I don't know. If you came in here and you asked me for $250,000, I'd have no problem giving it to you. And in any case, but the point is that's the kind of relationships that you want to build up. And when you do what you say you're going to do and you follow through and you make sure your investors get paid, I've said it. I said it right from the very beginning of my investing career. Once I learned it, money is the easiest part of the business.
Yeah.
There's more money out there than there are deals, and more people who are looking for a place to park money, and they want to park it into good deals with good people. Right. And so hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. I tell people that it's like getting married or whatever. When you go out there and you're investing money, it's like dating. I might invest some money with Brian and we do a deal and we get in and out, and I go, you know what? I didn't enjoy that experience. Brian didn't call me back. I didn't like his paperwork. We made good money, but I just didn't enjoy that experience. So next time I'm going to invest with Derek, and I tried Derek. And eventually you find some people that you want to do business with long term. Like I said, I hadn't borrowed any money in 10, 12 years from banks, but yet it's been the same people over and over and over again. When I'm teaching people, they seem to think that they need 20 investors, when really many times 3 or 4 investors can handle all your business, can really have a great relationship with and all that, but it may not be the first one. It's a relationship business. And if you treat people right, if you're the one taking the money, then they'll come back to the well. I've had Brian tell me, well, you're a known entity to me. That matters to him. Brian and I have done business. He's been one of my main investors for a decade or more. And we've done business over and over and over again. And it's very easy and fun. And we have a good time with it. But on your first one, there's way more due diligence. There's way more worry. And maybe you're not going to go out on a limb as much. Maybe you're not going to give them 100% of the sales price and rehab and everything. You're just not ready at that point in the relationship to do that. But it's a relationship business. That was the whole point of the Lifeonaire Investor Board when we started it, is to foster those relationships. What I find on the investor board is that the people who are good quit posting deals. Well, why? Because they got their people. They have no reason to go back to the board and try to raise money with new people because they've developed the relationships and they're a phone call away from getting their deal done. So they don't need to post anymore. But you got to start somewhere. And that was the point. Here's a place where people in Lifeonaire can meet up, start a relationship, do a deal or two, see how they like each other and all that kind of thing. And eventually there's no reason to post. But that's a good thing. That's a good thing. That means the relationship has gone beyond posting. And now we're texting, emailing, calling, and all that. And that's the whole point. That's what we wanted to foster when we started all that.
And I think if you're newer starting out and don't have relationships in place and don't have a track record, the worst thing you can do, because a lot of people, when they get their first deal, they're super excited, right? And they just want to go, go, go. I think the worst thing you can do is go to Aunt Susie for a loan, because Aunt Susie probably will not tell you no. So what I would instead do is take that deal to a local hard money lender and have them vet it for you. And if they give you the green light, then start shopping around for money. Because if they'll do the deal, you probably have a deal, right? And if it's a turd, they're going to tell you it's a turd. So I think that's just a safer way to get the aunt involved, because doing business with family can be difficult to begin with, and you don't want to screw it up. And then if you do decide to do that, you want to treat it like a business where you're recording a note and a mortgage, everything gets done properly, just so everyone's secured and there's no issues.
I would just add, one of the things that I would really love to see people do when they're just getting started out, maybe even new to Lifeonaire, is coming alongside of somebody who already has a good reputation. So you might have to give up a little bit of your deal to, maybe reach out to Brian and say, hey, Brian, I think I have them, but will you help me? Will you pre-vet this before I put it out to the community? Will you help me to present it in a way that people would be interested? And when you're coming alongside of somebody else, if it's your coach or if it's another experienced investor or something, your deals will get a lot more looks when someone else has already looked at it and sort of given a thumbs up that where they feel good about it versus just, coming out there and just throwing something out there for the first time by yourself.
I think another thing I see people posting on the board is especially new people, they post what they're going to pay. And in my mind, that is a mistake. I think you put the deal out there, have people call you based on their interest in the deal, and then you talk about what their structure is, how much they're going to make later after that, because posting on the board is marketing. And the purpose of all marketing is to get the call. And so if you don't post, I'm going to pay 8% or 12% or whatever, but if you just post, hey, I've got this good deal, I'm looking for this amount of money, here's all the numbers, yada, yada, yada. Text me if you're interested and we can chat. You're going to get a lot more calls. You're going to have a way higher chance of developing the right relationship. And you can explain all that stuff on the phone. And let's say, you were thinking that you were going to pay a straight interest rate, but maybe somebody wants to do a JV, but you like them. And, maybe it's going to morph into something different than what you thought it was going to be. But you're just going to get more calls. And that's, to me, I don't think everybody on the board understands that that's marketing. You want the call, you want the relationships, you want to talk to them. And there might be somebody who calls you and is willing to put up the money, but you're not really getting a good feeling about it, So anyway, in my mind, you don't have to post exactly how it's all going to work between you and the investor. You only need to post what the deal is like, or be willing to say, this is my idea of how to structure it, but I'm willing to talk about anything that makes sense or something that'll get more people to talk to you.
Yeah. I will say that some people have just disqualified themselves with the way that they put it out, that I have zero interest. When somebody says, I'm going to pay you 8%, well, it's, we haven't even had a talk yet, and you're already dictating what the terms are going to be, and what you should do is say, hey, let's have a conversation and come up with something that works for both of us, rather than dictating what the terms are going to be. Because, the reality of the situation is, when I first got started in the business, I paid my lender 15% and 3 points. The very first guy who I was borrowing millions of dollars from. And some people told me I was crazy, but the reality was, he was the one who enabled me to do all my deals. And I had his money for such a short period of time that it didn't cost me a lot. I had access to all the money I needed, and I was able to do deals that other people couldn't because they were waiting around for 7% money.
Right.
And so anyway, sometimes it's okay to pay a little more because the money's so easy.
In the golden rule of lending, he who has the gold makes the rules, typically. So you're gonna get a lot more looks if you just put out your deal like Ken and Steve were saying, and then figure out an amicable borrower-lender relationship.
Right. If you're hoping to get money at 10%, say, and then you have a conversation with Brian Meidam because you put out a good post and you didn't say 10%, that's just what you're hoping, and you wind up in a conversation with Brian and he says, well, I'm going to charge you 15 and 2 points. And then you can say, well, why? And Brian will explain, well, here's what I see as the risk, and I got to get paid for my risk. Well, you're learning. You're learning how Brian thinks. You're learning maybe things that he saw in your deal that you didn't see. That's way better for you. Even if you find somebody else that'll pay you 10%, you got a lot of good out of that conversation, a lot of learning out of that conversation. And Brian's not going to be mad if you find somebody else at 10. That's what he'd do. But you started a relationship.
Well, and to that point, Ken, I think that I think a lot of people lose sight of what you guys have just said, is like, this is a relationship business. And instead of focusing on whether you're paying 8%, 10%, find a number that works for both of you guys so that you can solidify a relationship. You build a track record, you do some deals together, you make some money together, you build trust, and then everything's going to work itself out fine. And I think that's a valuable way to approach it. And so to kind of summarize a couple things here, like, when you're lending money, when you're partnering with people, you want character, you want competency. Someone may have all the character in the world, but you want competency, and they know what they're doing, right? And they have a track record, which you guys addressed as well. And when you're doing your due diligence, wrapping it back into our discussion about money, make your deal work, paying a higher percentage. If you're able to do that and take it out of your pocket, it may be worth it to get that experience, to get the deal done. I've heard, I think all three of you guys say at some point over the time I've known you guys over the years, like, it's the cost of doing business. It's just the cost of doing business. And it's just part of it. And that's why also, there's not only a lot of lending going on in Lifeonaire, but there's a lot of joint ventures, which we haven't necessarily discussed a lot about the structure of that. But it's the same thing. A joint venture, you're in this together. I think it encapsulates the teamwork aspect involved of investing. Guys, have anything else? I know
one thing that we haven't discussed that I think is worthy of mention is the person who wants the money, has the deal and he wants the money. There's a different level of risk if that person is broke or if that person has a lot of net worth. Because if that person is broke, he may have the integrity we hope for, and is willing to sell his truck and ride a bike and all that, but the money just ain't there. And so much as he wants to, maybe he can't fix whatever's wrong. Whereas you have another person, and let's say he owns 2 or 3 rental houses with 50 or 100 grand equity in them. If he wants to fix it, he could sell one of those and fix it. And so those are 2 different people. It doesn't make one of them a bad person, one of them a good person. But I think it's worthy of knowing. And I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for a financial statement if you're on the edge with someone and it's their first deal, but you're thinking about doing it. I don't think it's unreasonable to find out what other assets they have and just bring up, would you be willing to, fix something if you had to? And let's just talk about it.
That's a great point, man. Yeah. Like being stressed financially and not having the means to deal with it could totally sway someone's ethics.
Well, maybe think about it. If someone poses a question about what if somebody files Chapter 13 on you, and that made me think about it, because the guy with net worth, he's not going to do that. He's going to figure out a way to pay you. But the guy that doesn't have any money, that's just new and doesn't have a lot of net worth, he could file them. Because that's what anyone would tell him to do, because he doesn't have any. He's got nothing to lose. If your net worth is $5,000 and you file bankruptcy, you're going to lose $5,000. That's it. But you get out of a $30,000 debt. And so it's just good to know. I've done deals with people that don't have net worth because I like them and I like the deal. All these things are not a no. They're just something to pay attention to.
And I've done deals where I've lent money and I didn't agree with the borrower's numbers. Let's say I didn't agree with, I think it's going to cost them 75 grand to fix this house. They're telling me, they're convinced they can get it done for 55, or they think the ARV is 250 and I think it's 215. I may still do that deal. I'll just structure it different where, let's say I do the math and after typical points and interest, I would be at, let's call it $15,000. I may structure it. I'll say, okay, if you're right, you're going to make more money. But I'll do the deal, but I'll get the first $10,000. And then anything over that, you're going to keep. So if you're right, you're going to save a whole bunch of money from lending costs on me. But I'm going to be guaranteed to get the first 10 grand out of the deal. So there's different ways you can structure it with people, to make them comfortable if they don't agree with your numbers.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Another thing that I thought I'd point out, and I've seen this many times, is sometimes the guy borrowing the money he's going to put some skin in the game. This is what I see over and over again. I want you to buy the house and I'll pay for the rehab. And so they want me to put up the 100 grand to buy the house, and then they're going to spend the 30 on the rehab, and that's their skin in the game. I won't do that. I will make them put up their 30 grand on the buy. That way I know I got their 30 grand because we spend it on day one. And then I'll fund the other 70, and then I'll fund the 30 to fix it later on in draws as they do the work. But it's safer for me to know if they say they're going to put up 30 grand, I want all of it on day one, because I don't have to worry about, they're like, well, I was going to put up the 30, but actually it was going to come from this other house that I was going to sell and it didn't close. So now I don't have it. I want their 30 right up front. And then I know we got it. One worry has been taken off the table just by, it's the same deal. And I'm putting up the same amount of money. We're just structuring it in such a way that my worry of them actually having the 30 to rehab it has now gone away.
That's a great tip, man.
Another thing that I started doing when lending is I always make a monthly payment due, even if it's not calculated based on the interest amount, because I was involved in a deal and it wasn't structured properly. And I learned this the hard way is that if let's say it's a 12-month loan and no payments due, and on month 3, the wheels fall off of this borrower and they're not working on the house. Everything's just sitting there. What can you do as the lender? Are they in default? No, right? No payments due. But now you've got to sit and wait until the end of month 12 before you can start taking action. Where if they default and don't make that payment, now you can start that process to remedy this. Otherwise, you're just going to sit and wait. So even if you make, if let's say the true payment would be $1,500 a month, and you guys agree, well, no, you're not going to have to do that. Let's just make them pay something. Just don't make it 0, because you have no remedy to fix a problem if one arises throughout the loan term.
That's great. Great tip, man. You guys have anything else?
I don't think so.
Well, I hope I want to first of all, thank you guys. I don't see any questions in the chat that we haven't addressed yet. Tell you what though, hopefully this call was valuable for you guys. If you have more questions for Ken, for Brian, for Steve, put them in the private Facebook group. These guys we'll get to it. We'll just tag them.
I'm going to put Brian's cell phone number in the chat just to make
it easier. And listen, we hope this gives you like a leg up. If you're a new investor, if you're a seasoned investor, hopefully you got something from this, maybe a new angle, new nugget, something that you can bring to your investing, improve the safety, the return, and the fun on that investment property. And you can take that with you moving forward. That's all we got, guys. Take care, everyone. Steve, you have anything else before we wrap it up here? You're muted, by the way, buddy.
Sorry. No, I just want to encourage everyone, do your own due diligence, look forward, and hopefully we will see all of you at the summit next month in Denver, Colorado.
Absolutely.
All right.
Awesome. See you, everyone. Take care. Have a great day.
Blessed day.
Thanks for having me. See you guys.
See ya.